Ladies and gentlemen, divorce and questions about marriage is all around us. Wedding season is around the corner, as well as people are coming out of the pandemic rethinking what it means to be married, or if marriage is something that they want. So I thought I would come on here and do a brief overview of a very contentious and hot topic: marital property and distribution. It's a very interesting and radioactive topic. Women get emotional about it, men get emotional about it, because it's about money. A very, very contentious topic. But before I get into the particulars, let me introduce myself. My name is Miriam, and this is the Legal Code. And on this channel, we discuss a wide range of legal topics, whether that's celebrity shenanigans with the legal aspect to it, as well as legal topics that are circulating or which should be circulating that I think that you should know about. So if you like that sort of thing, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course share with your friends and family if you think they will find value as well. Also, I would like to introduce that I have some legal coaching slots available. So if you would like the opportunity to work with me to go over your estate plan, which is very important to take care of, as well as your small business plan, if you are concerned about infringing on someone else's intellectual property, or someone may be infringing on yours and you need some legal advice, then don't forget to hit the link in the description box so you could set up an appointment to discuss with me. We'll do a deep dive into all the areas that are concerning you, and you will walk away feeling satisfied and know what your next steps are. So again, there is a link in the description box. Also, I would like to introduce that I have some legal code merch. So if you would like to purchase that, that is also linked in the description box. Now, without further ado, marital property, the laws that protect marriage. So if you are a proponent or you're against marriage, this case may change your mind about what it means to be married. So divorce, marital property, whether it's equitable distribution or community property, no matter what state you're in, these are curious topics for everyone, especially if you have sizable assets, or maybe you're growing your small business and you project that you will yield some handsome ROI in the future. I believe that when two people get together and agree to marry, I doubt that they're imagining the possibility of an end in sight. And more often than 50% of the time, marriage does and unfortunately end. And it's devastating for families and for society, because I believe that society is a proponent of marriage. And so because divorce has become more commonplace, the law has attempted to respond to the change in tides where divorce is more commonplace than marriage. So in American family law, if we look back in time, over a 20-year span from 1960 to 1979, there's been more changes to divorce and marital law than there were in the preceding 100 years. Yes, this time was extremely radioactive. There were so many changes with marital law, and there's several reasons for that, including women entering the workplace more and more than historically, women's changing roles vis-a-vis their families, so many factors, which is why the law had to respond to the changing times. Furthermore, since the women's movement began about 3 decades before, the law has struggled to keep up with the continuing evolving status of women in society. This is particularly evident in family law contexts, and most notably in marital distribution. So I say that to say, even though these laws have been passed, they're still 30 years behind what society is doing. So the laws that we have on the books now are still antiquated. Yet each state attempts to individually deal with community property and how assets are divided upon divorce the best way they have. And there's a uniform endeavor to recognize that each spouse has contributed to the marriage, whether it's monetarily or otherwise. So this progress was necessary in light of the increase in divorce rates and displacement of wives who had previously stayed home and come away with nothing but alimony after years and years and years of devotion. So examples of the law's attempt to correct and grant women equal status in marriage are California's community property laws and New York's equitable distribution statutes. Again, these laws were set up so not to leave women destitute who did not have the skills and access to go out there and work. So as of 1975, California allowed spouses equal management and equal control over community assets, with certain restrictions, of course, for real property transactions. Prior to this, the husband had complete dominion over community property. New York, on the other hand, uses equitable distribution to divide marital assets. So upon dissolution, courts are directed to consider tangible as well as intangible contributions to the marriage in order to compensate the non-earning spouse who chose to stay home and take care of the family instead of being a wage earner. So the laws are saying that this has quantifiable value, even though this person has not gone out into the workforce. So the goals of New York's equitable distribution statutes are laudable. However, some argue that at this point, the noble intent has become so distorted and overreaching in recent times because more and more women are becoming the breadwinners. So why should men have to pay such handsomely in alimony support? So let me tell you about the case that I guess set the tides. This case was a landmark case that has set the standard that we know for marital assets to include not just physical property such as real estate, but also a singer's voice as something to be valued in the divorce settlement. I know, sounds weird, right? But here's the story. So Frederica van Sleet, a well-known, world-renowned opera singer, started her singing career and has performed at the Met since 1970 in musicals and concerts, recitals, in venues throughout the world, including La Scala for those opera buffs out there, the Paris Opera, Vienna State Opera, the Salzburger Festival, and so on and so forth. So she's had assumed over 57 operatic roles on stage, 8 more in concerts, in this, progressing from minor parts to romantic leads. So she has had an illustrious and successful career. She is now a celebrated artist with the Metropolitan Opera, as well as the international recording artist, concert and television performances. She has garnered numerous awards and has even performed before the President of the United States. But before all the accolades, she was just a singer. She was a minor player with the New York's Metropolitan Opera. And in 1973, she met her husband, Peter Elkis. So just a minor singer trying to make it. She met her husband, who was a singer as well as a teacher. When they met, she was earning a mere $2,250 per year with the Met. At the end of their marriage, which I believe was 19 years later, she was earning a handsome $621,878 per year. Mr. Elkis, her soon-to-be ex-husband, argued that he gave up his own singing career during this time to nurture the marriage, to coach her, to take care of the children, and her career took off as a result of his sacrifices. He looked after their 2 children, and he claimed that because of his efforts, he contributed to his wife's rise to fame.
A lot of people hide behind their technique. They hide behind making perfect or good sounds or bell-like tones or whatever it is. And they go away from their humanity. They go away from their honesty. We do certain things to protect ourselves from pain. And that very often comes in non-permission to be who we are in our childhood. So I go about it by, for example, if somebody is holding and hiding behind their technique, I'll have them do things where they can't.
Her fame should be classified as a marital asset subject to distribution upon divorce. so that he should be compensated for his contribution. So he looked at his wife's career as an investment that he should be compensated for what he contributed into. So during the marriage, he claimed that he traveled with her throughout the world, attending and critiquing her performances, coaching her, rehearsals, photographed her for her album cover and magazine articles. He was her voice coach, teacher for 10 years. So as you can see, he put into this marriage intangible assets. And he states that he sacrificed his own career as a singer and a teacher to devote himself not only to her career and the lives of their young children, but that his efforts allowed her to become one of the most celebrated opera singers in the world. And so his career was at a stalemate, whereas her career progressed. So because of this celebrity status increased in value during their marriage, due in part to his contribution. And so he thought that he was entitled to equitable distribution of that marital asset, her career. What do you think about this?
It's not about to do it well or you shouldn't play it. How could anybody criticize what you're trying to come with from your very sensibilities? How can that's what music's all about. That's for me anyway, that's the essence.
Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Now, the lower court of New York said that the celebrity status was not something that could be quantified, so he cannot be compensated. Also, the court said that he reaped the financial benefits of their joint efforts because they were living together with their elevated lifestyles, and they already accumulated substantial marital property such as tangible assets, accounts, investments, real property. So that was enough to compensate Mr. Elkis. So they were pretty much saying, we have this that can compensate you. We're not going to have you put a lien on her career, essentially, to compensate you. He appealed that decision. And the higher court, the appellate division of the Supreme Court, reversed the lower court, said, no, we are going to consider her celebrity status as marital property, even though it's intangible. We're going to consider the intangible contributions that he made to the partnership. So this law that was in place was allowed to be interpreted to include not just the tangible assets, money, furniture, real estate, accounts, etc., but intangible contributions as well. Emotional support, educating the children, encouragement, essentially sweat equity, which I thought was clever because we're allowed to consider sweat equity in business. Why not in marriages? Additionally, the law also had a broad definition of marital property as property acquired during the marriage, regardless of how the title is held. So if a husband or a wife acquires property individually or secretly, even though they're married, that is going to be used in the calculation of marital property. So you can't hide in a marriage and acquire assets during the life of span of a marriage and think it's going to foreclose the other partner from being able to be compensated for it. It's still marital property, even if the other spouse doesn't know about it. So again, in addition to the broadest definition of tangible property, the court said because of this law, it was going to encompass terms outside the scope of traditional marriage, traditional property concepts, including assets that can't be transferred or exchanged. So what does this mean? This means the court was going to consider Kevin Samuels has a term, fit, fabulous, and feminine. Those aspects that a woman brings into a marriage that benefit a man but can't be quantified can be used in the calculation of marital assets. So we have a court saying that this has value, albeit it's intangible. The court is saying that it enhances the lives and should be considered in marital division. To further this point, the court referred to an older case and other decisions where, various licensing degrees such as the practice of law or medical license can be considered as part of marital distribution. They relied on this case, this O'Brien case, in where Mrs. O'Brien was awarded a share in her husband's medical license because they had no other assets. So the court argued that in order to avoid inequity that will befall Mrs. Bryan because she contributed to her husband being able to pursue his medical license, that they were going to rely on his education as marital assets. So the court pioneered an expansive reading of the law and declared that Mr. Bryan, with his medical degree and license, to be marital property with a certain value to be quantified. Yeah. So again, we'll take it back to the opera singer. So the Elkis court characterizes Mrs. Elkis' career as marital property in an attempt to fulfill the legislative intent behind the law. So essentially, court is saying that the non-earning spouse has a life estate, a lien on the career of the spouse that is earning indefinitely because they have contributed sweat equity in the marriage. What do you think about that? So if you marry someone and they finance your education, depending on what state you live in, and they finance your education, and you decide to divorce them after you received your education, you still owe them based on what they've contributed in the marriage. Now, don't be jaded by this. Again, the legislative intent was to prevent inequity that has previously occurred and befallen many of women upon the dissolution of marriage. So there's nobility in the reason why the law has been set up this way, so as to not foreclose and to not see value in the non-earning spouse, that they have contributed to the marriage as well, even if it can't be quantified. Accordingly, because Mr. Elkis, the music teacher, had been a voice coach, a primary babysitter, his wife's celebrity status was subject to valuation and distribution upon divorce based on Mr. Elkis's contribution, which catapulted her career.
Okay, you are infinitely more than your voice. Okay? You are the president, not your voice. So much is about the voice in what we do. The voice is simply the vehicle that expresses us. We're much more important or bigger than our voices.
So in light of all of this, what do you think? Do you think non-tangible contributions should be included in deciding marital assets? Do you think that the opera singer should have to contribute or should not have to contribute to her ex-spouse, even though he has contributed and put his career on the back burner to support her? Let me know your thoughts. I'm very curious about what you think. In closing, the law tells us that marital property is not limited to assets which can be exchanged for value, salable, assignable, transferable. Things of value acquired during a marriage are marital property, even though they may fall out of the scope of traditional property concept. So medical license, law licenses, they have value. So does emotional support, encouragement, cooking, cleaning, raising the children throughout a marriage also have intrinsic value that the court's saying we're going to quantify it, we're going to put a number on it. This should make us even more mindful as to who we marry. Now, for those out there who have dubious intent of entering a marriage so that someone else can finance your education only to divorce that person upon receiving that education, maybe this may make you think differently about using someone for your own gain, because your projected earnings will be considered in the distribution of marital property. Something to think about. Now, not all states follow this. Again, New York has this equitable distribution. California has their community property distribution. So depending on what state you are in, the laws may fall differently. But it's still something for you to think about. And I wanted to bring to your attention, in light of all of these divorces happening around us and why many people rethink divorce, because, you know, the saying goes, it's cheaper to keep her. And a lot of men want to avoid paying alimony and child support, so they rather maintain the marriage, maintain the household, so that their investment is not going out the window. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know. Don't be afraid in the comment section to let me know what you think about these laws that value intangible contributions in a marriage. Do you think the courts are right in putting a monetary value on this? I think they are. I think they're correct. I think too often things that are esoteric don't have a value in the way that hard cash does. And I think the courts moved in the right direction in including this in their definition of marital property. Of course, I believe it's excessive in many times, but laws like this is also a reason why people fight for their marriages, because they feel like they've contributed sweat equity, time, their youth, their mental, emotional, all sorts of things that are intangible. They have contributed and brought into the marriage. They've brought their best selves into the marriage, and they don't want to see their marriage end, especially over a long span of time, which is why so many people try to fight for their marriages because of laws like this. So at the end of the day, the law is set up to keep the foundation of marriage intact as much as possible, which is why divorce is so challenging and difficult, because the law wants married couples, because the law sees the benefits of having marriage in society, not only in terms of child rearing, but in terms of it leads to a more optimal society. Of course, there are the exceptions to this rule, but in essence, the law wants to encourage marriage and deter divorces as much as possible. So that's the reason why these draconian laws, it sounds controversial, but the crux of it is the law wants you married, which is why there's over 2,000 laws that protect married couples and very few on the books that protect unmarried couples, especially as it relates to women. Women have so much more beneficial interest in becoming married because of the 2,000 laws that protect married women. Pension benefits, tax benefits, home ownership, your right to determine whether or not your spouse lives or dies. Yeah, that is embedded in the sanctity of marriage. Alternatively, there are very few laws that protect unwed people the way they protect married couples. So in light of this, let me know your thoughts, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.